Hello and welcome to ESG Talk. I'm your host, Mandi McReynolds. We are so excited that you are with us this week. If you are involved at all in the environment, social, and governance space, you know that this week around the world is all about water. You see, it is Worldwide Water Day. It's also in combination with the UN's conference in New York focusing on water. So we thought it was critically important to bring to you, all of our listeners in our over 90 countries around the world, to talk about how companies and corporations with partnerships, pilots, and processes should address the issue of water. Join with me today are two phenomenal experts. First, we have Denise Vaughn, Vice President of ESG from Ferguson Enterprises. You may wonder, why would an enterprise focus on water? Well, it's because Ferguson is the largest distributor of plumbing and HVAC equipment in North America. The partner joined with us in this discussion is Christopher Lindsay, Vice President of Government Relations for the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officers, also known as IAPMO. Denise and Christopher, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So let's kick it off so that our audience can get to know you a little bit more. Christopher, I'm going to start with you for this first question. When we think about environment issues, particularly in business, oftentimes it's overshadowed by the emission conversation. I would love to hear from you. Why should business leaders care about water-related issues, particularly in the U.S.?
Well, it's a great question. When we think about the environment or climate change, I hope water is one of the first things that we do think about. I mean, after all, water is central to how we experience the changes to our environment that we need to do to adapt. From an increase in once-in-a-century storms that bring enormous amounts of rainfall and flooding in some areas, to the rise of oceans that is impacting where we build our homes and our businesses, to historic droughts that's bringing new water stresses and is causing us to rethink how we use our water resources in many states. Water in all its form, either too much or too little, impacts every one of us. You know, there's a saying that we use in our community that carbon is to mitigation what water is to adaptation. And we're finding that is indeed the case. Now, all this also doesn't include the many Americans who've been left behind and who do not have access to clean drinking water. So part of what we're excited about with our conversation today and with our partnership with Ferguson is focusing on this education and awareness so that we can help others realize just how important water is when we talk about ESG.
And Denise, I want to turn it over to you because it's a really important part to build on. I was intrigued by Ferguson's latest ESG report, where it talked about the challenging related heights of water stress, and it may increase needs for business partners and performance of our products. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because that sounds to me like a risk consideration, and Christopher alluded to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just layering on to the previous question with Christopher, a partner once described climate change and water issues as, if climate change is the shark, water is its teeth. So I think that's just a good visual to understand the importance of water. But some people may not realize how core water is to Ferguson's business. So be it a residential application or a non-residential application, if your readers are working from a home office or in a commercial building, likely the water that flows through that building has been impacted by Ferguson in some capacity, whether it's the pipes, valves, and fittings that are under the ground, or the rough plumbing behind the walls, the faucets, the fixtures, the equipment in the mechanical room, if there's fire or sprinkler systems in the walls. A lot of that is what Ferguson is focused on. If it's not too early to start throwing out the water puns, it literally flows through just about everything that we do. And part of ESG, or really the premise of ESG, is looking at risks and opportunities. How are you measuring? How are you managing? How are you mitigating? So while we do look at risks, and just a few of those as examples are, decreased access to fresh water and the financial, the health, the reputational risks. potential water restrictions that could result in supply chain disruptions as water is used to manufacture many products. And then the potential of increased regulatory intervention, which could add to costs and increase complexity. But where we like to focus at Ferguson is more on the opportunities. So where do we have the opportunities to impact social and environmental good and also make sure that we're maintaining a viable, long-term, successful business? And so Christopher touched earlier on adaptation. The three areas where we think we have the most opportunity to secure a water resilient future is around adaptation, conservation, and water infrastructure. And if we peel back just a little bit on each of those, I think the adaptation conversation is so relevant because despite our best efforts with mitigation, we know that the world is getting warmer. Christopher alluded to the increase in natural disasters, sea levels rising. So how are we helping the built world prepare and mitigate some of these risks, again, on the opportunity side, while helping our customers make sure that there's a sustainable future for our current generation and future generations to come? And then conservation is just that, be it through products, water certified products that save water, or advancing technologies like leak detection and predictive analytics. How are we working to conserve water all across North America? And lastly, water infrastructure. We have a tremendous opportunity, but reports say as much as 44 million Americans are drinking from systems that have violations of the Safe Water Act. So how do we then, again, make sure that we're not only responding and helping our municipal partners, but we're getting ahead and being proactive of any problems that might happen? So just to wrap that up, it's really a focus for Ferguson on product and innovation and helping to solve the water crisis in the U.S.
I think it's really important, too, that you talk about it through that lens of risk and opportunity. And really thinking back to a previous guest we had, Jared at Forvis, we talked about how do you look at ways of addressing the risk through risk scenario testing and other elements in environment, social governance. And I was last week with a bunch of chief sustainability officers, and we were talking about, sometimes people get overwhelmed in all of it, but if you can take a step back and you can focus on pilots and partnerships, the work will advance faster. And just bringing that focus in and not trying to tackle it all at once. So there are many ways your two organizations are working together. And I wondered if both of you would share a little bit deeper about your partnership, because it could be an incredible model for those trying to tackle different issues with environment like water.
Yeah, I think that's great. Christopher, you want to kick us off with our partnership?
Absolutely. And, we've been fortunate as an organization to work for the last 4 years with Ferguson, because I think it really comes down to that we share a common vision to really helping the most in dire need of, water and sanitation challenges in the United States, and working together to meet those needs. First, I think it's probably helpful to add a little context to our discussion. And so let's look at the problem. In recent years, we've been fortunate to partner with a number of organizations to do 2 landmark studies. And these organizations such as Dig Deep, U.S. Water Alliance, and the American Heart Association. And through these studies, we've been able to confirm, really 2 important findings. First is that the number of people in the United States without water access is actually increasing. There are currently more than 2 million people that don't have the clean drinking water and sanitation access that we've come to expect for many of us, which is just unfathomable when we also realize that we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And one of the things that the study confirms is that it's a problem that impacts every single state, and both rural and urban populations alike. Secondly, these studies have found that investment in these communities is not only the right thing to do, but it actually just makes good business sense. For every $1 invested, we see a $5 in return. And 5 to 1 is an incredible rate of return, especially in today's economic environment. There's also economic risk, though, if we don't invest. These studies found that, more than about $850 million a year is lost in work time because of the lack of access to clean drinking water. And also, it causes more than $760 million in healthcare costs. So when we look at it, of course, we look at the economic impact, we look at the fiscal implications of these of our actions, but really also what comes out, and I think it's important for us to discuss in today's call, is kind of the human element to the whole story. For us, it's when our team was working on one project on the Navajo Nation, helping to install water systems in a number of homes. One of the homes was owned by an 80-year-old woman. And it was the first, as we were able to turn on the tap for the first time, it was the first time in her entire life that she had experienced running water in her own home. The other, comes an even more recent example, comes from some of our work in Alabama, addressing open pipe situations where sewage is literally piped directly from the homes into the backyards of so many households. And for us, helping to address these sanitation issues so that kids and grandkids can play in their backyards without it being filled like a cesspool, that's really kind of the human impact, that we're going after. And then, going back to our partnership, to solve these problems, we realize that it really does take a village. It takes communities, takes governments, takes nonprofits, really working together. And that's the only way we're going to be able to, bring solutions to many of these long-standing problems. And what we believe sets this in partnership, our partnership with Ferguson apart, is having two industry leaders, both corporate and from the nonprofit sector, collaborate together to work to make these pertinent issues better. And together, our work is focused on three separate areas. One is education and awareness, so we can advance the growth of the plumbing and mechanical industry and recognize that these services are key to providing training opportunities and to expanding services. Two is access projects. Through our community plumbing challenges and other demonstration projects, these pilot projects, we're actually providing access to a number of households and communities. And the third part of our partnership, which is unique, is focusing on industry research, including key technical, environmental, or social findings that are really going to be helpful to us defining the problem and then being able to tailor our interventions moving forward. So we're excited to be working together. And Denise, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I love, Mandi, how you talked about partnerships and pilots. That is a lot of the general philosophy in which Ferguson operates, be it with valued partners like IAPMO or customers or suppliers, other industry leaders. So we could not be more proud of the work that we're doing alongside IAPMO, and the fact that we're changing lives and we're driving business is very rewarding to us. So if we look collectively, as you heard the great examples that Christopher provided, we're bringing together organizations to solve real life problems in the United States that many people don't realize the dire situation that a lot of our citizens live in. But then also we're expanding, and the Ferguson business model is built on relationships. Mm-hmm. So how are we working alongside IAPMO and also our customers, like I said, like municipal partners, to build these water resilient communities and identify innovative solutions, things that haven't been done before, like Christopher was talking about in the Black Belt region of the South. And we're also helping to unlock and help our customers navigate towards funding opportunities to continue this progress, it's very exciting. It's really, it's a big problem, but it's nice to contribute in even the smallest way towards the solution.
Well, I think it's a good way for our over 90 plus countries that tune in to think about it can be communities large and small, and then our over 60,000 listeners around the globe, to understand that when we talk about partnerships, and I think your example from Ferguson is so critical, is this isn't about a one-time partnership. I was just at our ESG task force meeting this week, and we were unpacking a partnership like this, and the 6 different pillars that we could do long-term over the course of several years to create collective business and society impact. And the question came up, well, why this versus many or other pieces? And I was like, jokingly, but it was like, we don't want the swipe left comment, like, you're just there for one night, 1 year. You want somebody who you can have that intensive impact, and impact in partnerships and pilots often take the first year you learn, the second year you build on it, and the third year you accelerate, or you learn what not to do. So it's a really important pathway. I loved hearing that story. The other key that I would take away for our listeners is pay attention to what Christopher said, the economic and financial impact. If you care about your investor community, I think this part of S Awakening is going to come. And you have to be able to pull in not only what is the economic value of your product, but what is the economic impact of society of your work as well. And so some really critical things that Christopher had said there. So we talked about pilots and partnerships a little bit. Denise, I want to come back to you and talk about process. I know you recently were a Workiva customer, and Workiva supports this show and getting out information of best practices. How do you think about water and your ESG reporting and the process at which you are measuring the success when you think of this critical area?
Yeah, I think that's a great point to raise, because we all know the adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. That's right. So we are kicking off Workiva and very excited to enhance our tool set to be able to help us not only with measurement, but with our ESG reporting at large. So we view Workiva as a tool, a platform that will help us integrate all of our various data systems and help us with reporting on the good work that we're doing in the ESG space, whether it's regulatory and compliance related, or it's just the impact story that we're working to tell. We work really hard, Mandi, to stay in touch with our stakeholders and our ESG priorities. And I say priorities because you touched on this earlier. It's a big world and a big field with a lot of opportunities. So we think it's very important to listen closely and stay in tune with what our stakeholders are expecting through us. So our strategy, our reporting strategy, is built on that listening and looking at our analysis of our risk and talking to our stakeholders. We're very, very fortunate to have an incredibly supportive board and leadership team that helps us set our strategy and define our goals and our targets, which leads into the reporting. And it won't be a surprise to any of your listeners that there is a multitude of standards and frameworks, and I think they're growing and expanding and changing daily. So it's really important to decide where and how you're going to align your ESG reporting. For us right now, it's SASB and TCFD, and then we align with UN SDGs 6, 8, and 12. So just understanding where you have the opportunity to make the greatest impact. And Workiva will be a wonderful tool for us to measure and report on success.
Well, I look forward to walking with you with the journey. That's my favorite part of the job, is we all learn from each other as we get clearer about both the importance, the impact, and then how we tell that story. And a way forward with both of your examples were wonderful for us to think about partnerships at a deep level, pilots to learn, and a process to document so you can be transparent. Denise and Christopher, thank you so much for joining the show. It was a delight to hear from both of you about water as a critical issue and how companies can find a path forward on their issues that are most important to them. Audience, we look forward to you tuning in to future shows, and we'll talk real soon.